He knew something was wrong when the grot flew past his face like bad luck with teeth. The cave swallowed the light and fed the dark back as echo. Ufthak Blackhawk, newly minted big boss, neck stitched to a stronger body by a laughing butcher, stood over a temperamental shock rifle and watched the day arrive in the shape of trouble. The Tekwa had burned its way across a world of temples without gold, traps without honor, and beasts that learned too slowly what Daka teaches quickly. No spires to climb, no sky to own. Just caves. A boss without a skyline is a boss without a stage, and the boys had begun to smell boredom like a wound. They blocked his cave mouth with beef and bravado, chests lifted like shields, tusks bared. Other species call that a threat. Orks call it mourning. He had rank now. Dameklord's mark burned onto his command like a brand on living meat, yet rank is only the beginning of an argument. Muscles are a vote. Scar tissue is a signature. The cult of speed especially doesn't read fine print. It reads tire tracks and funerals. The front orc's laugh was a hollow drum. Rip toof, bad moon colors, speed freak goggles, eyes that hated stillness like a sin. A challenge then, not a duel of blades, but of meaning. A test the fast favor. A race at sunrise. Respect at the finish line. Ruin for the fool. Ufthak weighed options like he weighed enemies, by how loud they cracked when they broke. He could crush skulls and call it done, but the speed freaks would only hear that as fear of the road. Leadership is a storm. You must ride it, not hide it. He sent the grot to fetch genius on one wheel, Daboffin, a mech boy who had replaced doubt with engineering, and the night yawned open. Some bosses carve their names on banners. Ufthak Blackhawk carved his in talk. Moons, boots grinding temple dust into a paste of old prayers and new oil. Daboffin skimmed along on his gyro-stabilized monowheel, thinking in sparks and smoke.
Speed,
Ufthak told the knight.
and cornering.
Because Riptoof would change the rules to win, of course he would, and so the only answer was to build a rule breaker. Time was the only currency Daboffin couldn't steal. He sucked air between iron teeth and named the price. A dawn too soon, a scrap heap too empty. Still, mechs are part priest, part pyromaniac. The more impossible the ask, the brighter the grin. They hammered in the dark, and the dark hammered back. Doc Drosfang sharpened scalpels by instinct, as if the sun might rise asking for a limb. Mogrot Redtoof, Ufthak's favored fist, a man whose skull had never met a problem it couldn't headbutt, grinned in the torchlight and promised extra weight for extra violence. Even Princess, the red mountain of a squig that ate problems until they stopped being problems, snored like a volcano in remission. Dawn crept like a spy. The west wore thunderheads like teeth. The south opened into gullyland and bad decisions. The start line was a scar scratched in dust. Grots chained together would be the finish tape. Orks gunned engines in a chorus of threat. Warbikes, buggies, dragsters like knives on wheels. Riptoof's ride glinted chrome like a dare. There was laughter, the kind with stakes. Ufthak arrived in a vehicle that would make a lesser god cross itself. It was a truck only as a cathedral is a building. Chunked up wheels for uneven bliss. A heart ripped from something bigger than pride, bolted into the cage where sanity goes. Twin jet pods welded at the rear, not wings, but blasphemies against gravity. It was heavy as sin and twice as motivated. He took the wheel. Mogrot slid in beside him, bones eager. In the bed behind, something squeaked. Nizquick the grot, because cowards also have a place in history, underfoot. Princess raised her head to blink dumb happiness at doom. The starter climbed a rock. A grot raised a flag like a joke. A slugger barked the truth. The flag dropped. The grot dropped with it. Because orcs don't do ceremony, they do impact. Engines howled. The world yanked itself backward. The truck leapt like a beast trying to escape its own skin. The stitched seam on Ufthak's neck burned hot. He clenched his jaw until ambition drowned the pain. They tore across the plain toward a spire that looked like a finger accusing the sky. Riptoof leapt ahead, light, swift, impatient, only to discover that speed without weight is a rumor at the first hard corner. A booster blaster tried to knife past on Ufthak's right. He offered it a nudge backed by physics and religion. The buggy decided to become shrapnel. The sun caught the fire as it bloomed, turning morning into a wound. They skidded around the spire, the truck biting earth like it owed it money, Princess and Nisquick thrown against the side plates in a harmony of fear and glee. Ufthak could see it now. The race would not be won by lines on dirt, but by how the dirt bled. The road did not test them. Enemies would. Burned Scrawny's camp like regret. Tall skimmers with knife rims, skyboards with champions who had long forgotten the weight of mercy, and a gunship that drank light until the world looked thinner. Drukhari, the Spikies, predators who harvested screams, not victory. Their armor was an insult forged into edges. Their laughter had forgotten laughter. They didn't open fire first. They slithered among the orcs' engines, jeering, close enough to touch, close enough to steal, close enough to make a point about who mattered. They cut across the race to show off. That was the mistake. The insult hit Ufthak like a brand. He shouldered the shock rifle, sparing reality a glance before he twisted it. The generator screamed. The air tore. The lower engine casing of a skimmer vanished out of the world, and the craft lurched as if realizing its own mortality. Orks cheered. A skyboard cut for his throat, blade flashing, and only the grot's shriek saved the neck Drozfang had married to its new body. Ufthak ducked. Steel bit the seat. He handed the wheel to Mogrot and went to war. The flatbed became a killing floor. A bored rider stitched fire across his chest. The pain said, now, and the hammer said, later. Ufthak swatted the rider from the sky with the snaz hammer, a crack of bone across the roll cage. Another rider soared too close. Confident the wound had already killed its prey, the shock rifle erased its torso and half its future. The third danced out of line with a grace that made words feel clumsy. And the fourth met Princess, airborne and joyous. Squigs do not philosophize, they interrupt. Board and rider became separate stories. Both ended. Ufthak pulped the survivors with the hammerhead and laughed like thunder learning to breathe. Nisquick, he would have said, if he'd had time to scold. But the grot had found a new religion. The skyboard beneath its feet lurched and spiraled, Princess still attached, and both vanished upward into a corkscrew of nightmare. This is how grots prey, by pressing buttons and surviving long enough to press them again. The gunship drifted in, heavy with menace and passengers, hooks, chains, flayed masks that pretended to be faces. A helmed figure stood among them, hair like a black waterfall, a blade like a sneer, a pistol that ate light and spat absence, a leader. Not a title, but a gravity. Ufthak fired. The leader wasn't there. The beam chewed the engine out of a scrapjet instead and lunged on for something else, unfortunate. The leader vaulted to the truck with an elegance that made physics stare. Crystalline blade, dark light pistol, hooks for a soul without eyelids. The flatbed shrank to a duel. The pistol fired. The world lost a side plate. The blade flicked. Pain opened in Ufthak's ribs. He swung the snazhammer in a two-handed arc meant to end legends. The leader folded under it, without panic, without hurry. Ufthak smashed a rail instead, and earned another wound for his trouble. He knocked the blade wide, tore it from graceful hands, reached for the throat, and learned a truth Drukhari teach the dying. There is always another knife. The hidden blade cut deep. Hands are stories. This one ended halfway down the forearm. For a heartbeat, all Ufthak could see was the cardinal spray. All he could hear was the blood's arithmetic. The dark light pistol lifted to erase his face, and then gravity delivered Princess, falling from her corkscrew devotion, mouth wide, appetite wider. The leader's arm vanished at the shoulder. Dark blood hissed like secrets. Nizquick whooped somewhere overhead, grot as comet, squig as payload. The leader staggered, recalculated, and launched away, one-armed and still balanced like a lie that keeps getting told, back toward the smaller command skimmer. Survival is not cowardice. It is future cruelty deferred. The race poured into the gullies now, walls tightening like a throat. Engines fought air, steel scraped stone. Riptoof still led, more rumor than machine in the dust haze. A warbike and a scrapjet endured at speed. Drukhari craft slipped through space with snake intelligence, trapped now in the ravine's jaw. Ufthak searched the stone for an answer, and found one. A spur of rock tilted like a blade in the earth. He did the math, angles, momentum, sacrilege, and grinned with all the teeth he hadn't yet lost. When the enemy writes the rules, you don't break them. You run them over.
Steer there,
he told Mogro, pointing with a bleeding stump. Mogro asked no questions. Obedience is a kind of faith, and Mogro was a believer. The truck shouldered toward the spur. Ufthak used the butt of the hammer to hit the big red button de Boffin had left like a dare. Rockets lit. The truck did not accelerate so much as opt out of reasonable behavior. It hit the rock. It climbed the rock. It left the rock like a sin forgiven too quickly. For a breath, they were in cathedral air. For a breath, the world made a shape that might have been grace. Then gravity wrote its name across the page. They landed on the Drukhari leader's craft with the sincerity of an executioner. Crunch. Metal became memory. The truck bounced, snarled, rolled on, still dragging speed like a cloak. Behind them lay a flat, elegant tomb with a tire track running straight through the leader's chest. If it stood after that, it deserved to live. Some monsters earn their survival by being interesting enough to meet again. Ufthak wrenched back into the driver's seat, steering one-handed by anger and habit. The rocket sputtered, coughed like old gods, then gave him one last shove. He took the home stretch wide open, the gully becoming a throat he meant to split. He passed Riptoof. He had just enough time to wave with his stump, a king's gesture, a joke, a promise, and then the final bend arrived like debt. He muscled the wheel, the truck bit and held. The camp erupted ahead in a dark, delighted sea. The finish line screamed. Chains snapped. Grots did what grots do best, die underfoot. The truck pulverized the tape. The orcs howled the sound of belonging. Behind, a wounded skimmer truck overshot into camp and discovered that no one meets a crowd of orcs by accident and remains unboarded. The boys piled on, clinging, tearing, laughing the way wolves laugh when meat is all around. Chance found a name and beat it into air. Ufthak, Ufthak. Respect, loud, simple, sufficient. Riptoof's face soured like milk left in sun. Irrelevant now. He had demanded a race. He had received a lesson instead. Ufthak let the truck purr to a halt. Victory tastes like oil and iron filings. He breathed both and started to think about future wars. Mogrot obeyed an older instinct. He looked up. When the ground loves you, fear the sky. The thunderheads that had stalked the horizon all morning opened their mouths. Between their teeth, 3 sleek flyers, diving like knives, choosing hearts. Drukhari air support. The world tightened. The camp inhaled. "Tractor cannons!" Ufthak roared, and the word was a weapon. Mogrot vaulted for the armory. Nisquik somehow survived its own skyboard exorcism and returned babbling joy and terror in equal measure. "Find Drozvang," Ufthak added, like remembering to tie off a vein. "I need a new hand." He did not say armor like a request. He said it like an inevitability. Beaky plate rebuilt around a butchered soul. Captured war plate fused with orcish hunger. It made him look like a statue, built to be desecrated again and again. He bled into it, and it bled back strength. The flyers screamed. Their fuselages were sins. Their weapons were answers to questions no one with a conscience asks. Splinterfire sleeted into the crowd. Flesh stiffened where venom wrote commandments, then loosened as bodies realized they could no longer carry weight. A boy staggered, spitting black as his heart went on without him. Another laughed as his arm turned to glass and shattered, still clinging to a shooter that kept firing out of habit. The tractors woke, coils howled, chains sang like storm serpents and reached for the sky. One flyer twitched too late. The field bit. The machine's grace became a shiver and then a descent. It hit the ground wrong and stayed. 2 more curved away, clever as guilt. Orks surged toward the crashed craft with tools that double as weapons and songs that double as confessions. The Drukhari inside found what all artists of suffering eventually find. Suffering that looks back. But none of it was clean. Poison is a democracy. It votes in every direction. Nisquik pulled a boy out from under a spinning wing, only to discover that heroics don't stop venom from choosing. The boy looked at the grot once, confused, then lay down in the dust and let the world end him. Ufthak tasted the sky's metal on his tongue and named the next thing, counter-raid. Orks don't endure for the sake of enduring. They endure so they can go forward. And forward was exactly where the Drukhari lived. He stood high on the truck's ruined cage, raised the snaz hammer, and declared the day open for business.
Wow!
Sound rolled out of the camp like a front line. Voices joined until the word lost vowels and became pressure. The flyers reeled. The cannons cycled. The boys loaded trucks that smelled of iron and promise. Mechs strapped new mistakes to old wisdom and christened them with spit and brag. The one-armed memory of their leader lay somewhere in the ravines, chest crushed, future uncertain. Riptoof stood at the edge of the crowd, caught between envy and belief. Ufthak flexed the new hand the doc wired to his stump, wrong size, right intention, and felt madness hum beneath his skin like good machinery. He had won a race because someone told him not to slow down. He would win a war because someone else had dared to exist where he could see them. Some commanders read maps. Ufthak reads insults and writes his answers in wreckage. That night would not be sleep. It would be a count of ammo, of enemies, of working engines and willing bodies. Orks do not mourn. They rebuild and leave grief to species who can afford it. The Tekwa had found a world unfriendly to spectacle, stingy with loot, rich with targets that believed themselves interesting. Temples hid frescoes where machines should have been. Beasts learned, slowly, that Daka is a language with just one word, and Drukhari learned, briefly, what happens when you turn a race into a stage and try to steal the spotlight. Ufthak's ledger grew 3 new entries. Respect from the cult of speed, earned on a line drawn in dust and paid for in parts. A feud with shadows in high boots and higher cruelty. A rumor that the Mech Lord's throne might someday need a head that fits it better. That last one would take patience. Accidents are a kind of engineering. You plan them with the same care you build ricket jets. You don't hurry the future, you arm it. At dawn, they rolled out with trucks bristling and skyboards rebaptized into Ork religion. Princess gnawed at a mask taken from a dead artist of pain and found it bland. Mogro rode shotgun with the serenity of a boulder. Nizquick held a freshly wired detonator like a love letter. The thunderheads moved off. The sky looked clean. It was a lie. The galaxy is never clean. It is a machine that eats names and spits out echoes. Ufthak Blackhawk smiled like a problem that chooses you. He didn't need tall buildings to look down from anymore. He had speed and a long memory. He had a wall, the moving kind, built from engines and wanting. The voice you hear now is not prophecy. It is the sound of tires chewing distance. It is the word that ends every question Orks ask. War, not shouted, but driven. Races end at a line. Reigns end at a hammer. They will say he won a race. They will forget he started a war. Let them. Forgetfulness is a resource, too. Ufthak spends it well. Thus the record is sealed. Another fragment of the 41st millennium laid bare. You have walked with the grimdark storyteller. Subscribe, like, and let your words be etched below, for there are always more grim tales to tell.